Indeed, great questions have practically characterized our cultures. At times, they've taken us down some rather strange paths. They've given rise to religions, and of course, they've given birth to and destroyed entire civilizations. But curiously, the most important questions, the greatest ones of all, have yet to be answered. And as long as we don't surrender, as long as we continue asking ourselves these questions, no matter that we might even suspect finding an answer to them is impossible, we will continue being human beings. We will continue evolving and growing. There are many ways to formulate the very same question. And the first question is, what are we? Are we animals? Extraordinary animals, but animals all the same? Or are we something more than that? And if we are, what's the difference between us and the rest of the species who live and change alongside us? We live immersed in the reality of a technological world that no other living being has been capable of creating. However, if we think that this makes us some kind of super being, a kind of culmination of evolution itself, we'd be making a very big mistake. Many people believed that man was the irrefutable destiny to which life simply had to lead in its process of changing over time, as if we were the center of the universe to which all else was subject. But it isn't quite like that. The fact that our modernity, for instance, has enabled us to communicate over incredible distances is nothing more than the fruit of the needs of our species. The same need that has enabled butterflies to communicate with their mates by chemical means over dozens of miles, which for them is an incredible distance as well. It's the same imperious need that has allowed bats to invent their radar-like vision, or fungi to invent penicillin. Every invention responds solely to the demands for survival of the species that invents it. However, inventions don't make one species different from another. By that yardstick, all creatures, whether simple or complex, would be nothing more than biological organisms. Some simple, some more complex, but organisms all the same. Throughout the course of human knowledge, there have been a series of events or developments considered key in demonstrating a kind of dividing line, a cutoff point between human beings and other living things. But for many people, these historical occurrences have lost the strength of their argument as human knowledge has increased in a variety of different areas. One of these classical key events was the advent of language. No other species could speak. No other being could wonder about its conscience or its transcendence. We are Homo querens, the being that interprets itself. Philosophy has also tried to define man as Homo faber, the being who manipulates tools. We have been called Homo ludens, those who play. And of course we are also Homo orans, beings who pray to a higher being. But let's not get into that, not for now anyway, because metaphysics aside, none of these definitions fits our reality quite as neatly and exclusively as they were originally thought to. For starters, we could have an exhaustive debate in an attempt to establish the unique characteristics of our principal form of communication, the word. Written, spoken, or imagined, it is without a doubt the most complex and perfect means of expression. It describes symbols and intangible things, even things that don't exist in the physical world. Words, speech, is certainly something special. Nevertheless, we mustn't forget that there exists an infinite number of systems of communication in the animal kingdom, and all of them are languages. Many are primary, but surprisingly, some of them are rich and very complex. In fact, they're all as rich and complex as the species using them requires them to be, not a bit more nor a bit less. Because in nature, it would be a clear waste to have too big a brain containing parts of no practical use. The question is, if we look for a difference between animals and ourselves as a function of the capacity for communication, we'd find that such a difference would be a gradual one at best. It might be enormous, but only in a sense of degree. A question of quantity, as it were, but not quality.
Take a pose.
Another parameter postulated as proving the difference between them and us has been the use of tools. For a long time, it was believed that in order to use instruments, it was necessary to have a privileged intelligence, a superior biological level. But alas, we're faced with the same dilemma. As we have learned more and more about animals, we have observed that the use of utensils is hardly an exclusive trait of human beings. Without a doubt, no other species on the planet makes use of such sophisticated mechanisms as the ones invented by humanity's great geniuses. But we must admit that we are once again up against a fact that merely highlights distinctions as a matter of degree. The technological distance that separates us from animals could be described in a geometric progression, exponential even. But given that technology doesn't make us any more human than we already are, it doesn't differentiate us from them. And even among the tiniest of insects with very simple neuronal structures, we can find examples that refute the theory that Homo habilis was the first or most advanced being to use tools, and thus establish an unequivocal point of differentiation between himself and the rest of living things. This wasp chooses, or rejects as the case may be, pebbles it needs to make vibrate with impeccable mastery, and without the need of intelligence per se. The wasp needed to develop this technique to bury its eggs underground, out of the reach of predators. Just like all beings, it must protect its young. It digs a nest, covers it up, and then assumes an appearance suitable for hunting prey. It injects a dose of paralyzing venom, a dose as perfectly calculated as the most advanced scientific system could measure. An anesthetic. Finally, after depositing an egg upon it, it fixes it to the wall. With the provisions necessary for its young to feed sufficiently during their larval stage, it will cover its extraordinary pantry with a magnificent show of dexterity, using the elements its ecosystem has placed at its disposal. It will even use different sized and shaped pebbles for each different phase of the project. This four-winged marvel gives continuity to its genes. Its biology demands such behavior. It was the only possibility it had for its species to continue, to survive. It's not smart. It probably doesn't even know why it does what it does, but its instinct substitutes perfectly for its ignorance. And instinct is a manual with few defects. Between the insect's pebble and the engineer's steamroller, there is certainly a great distance with respect to the applied sciences. But the tools of the wasp and those of man are points along the same technological curve. Distant points, no doubt, perhaps even the beginning and the end of some curious coordinate, but distant points no less, and a matter of degree. Another characteristic of mankind that is supposedly unique is the capability to play, and thus the possibility to enjoy, or conversely, to get bored. Yes, the quality of Homo ludens, the being who can have fun, was pointed to as an exclusive condition of a special being. Yet for quite some time now, many scientists, naturalists, and even the majority of modern philosophers are conscious of the fact that other species also enjoy their moments of leisure. In fact, they do so just as we imperiously need play as a way to develop and perfect our abilities, or even as a way to escape and elude the stress of everyday life. It's not hard to find examples. We needn't look much beyond other mammals. We can easily observe how elements found in one's surroundings can be used as tools for provoking pleasure. And how magnificent it is. Now, is this surfing or what? Which is all to say, we're not even the only species that knows how to take advantage of a good wave. The fact is, we could look at a lot of things, play, language, the use of tools, etc., and try to prove if we are or aren't just another animal. But in all probability, what we'd find is that other mammals, or fish, or insects, cross over those sacred borders we somehow feel should be impermeable. What almost certainly leads us to hold the firm conviction that we are something more than a savage is that when we visualize man, we imagine him working on Fifth Avenue, pulling the strings behind a complex society that seems to obey almost magically some omnipotent computer. We can't stop thinking of ourselves as a civilized, technological, futuristic being who has taught itself medicine, mathematics, and physics, and who has been capable of transforming and destroying the planet almost at will. But let's consider for a moment the other side of humanity. A very numerous side, as it happens. One that still values the secrets of more balanced and sustainable life with respect to the environment. This is in no way a defense of the noble savage, but despite the limitations and difficulties that weigh upon these ancestral people, stuck in the past though they may be, the reality is that they still maintain, and honorably so, their primitive links with nature. They are coherent within the scope of their own nature. Let's consider the fact that these people, who wear only the barest of attire, do not needlessly waste or destroy anything. They respect life as if their own lives depended on it. They look wild, an anachronism, and they sustain themselves in an unstable balance. But it is, whatever we may think, the precious cradle of all that we are today. At this point, no one doubts, well, no one who wouldn't want to be considered an animal in the worst sense of the term, that a New Yorker is no more a person than a New Guinea Aborigine. Nevertheless, current society has perverted the perception of this reality, offering us a false appearance of ourselves, precisely due to the fact that we are steeped in a culture that is, at times, so artificial. We might believe that there is an abyss between the behavior of animals and modern human life. But that abyss shrinks to mere nuance if we leave the surroundings of our modern civilization and submerge ourselves in our original habitat. Despite the merely circumstantial differences among the different human cultures on Earth, we are all people, independent from whatever our habitual ecosystem might be. The only thing is that, in this ecosystem, our customs might seem closer to those of the rest of living beings. The fact is, the sense of distance between man and beast diminishes or grows to a large extent as a function of purely anecdotal aspects. But let's consider another dimension, the fourth dimension, time. It's a fact that a troglodyte more closely resembles a simple primate than a civilized Homo sapiens from the 21st century. Nevertheless, while they might be separated by hundreds of thousands of years, both of these men are Homo sapiens. Or was there a son somewhere with a special lineage whose father was still an animal? And if that was the case, who chose this new being as a mate to perpetuate its genes, a beast? Biologically, we are only an animal. And historically, there could never have existed such a sudden rupture from one generation to the next. It would not be logical to think that a generation of animals had a subsequent generation of people. But whatever our origin, what is certain is that, just like all the other species on Earth, we have been adapting and changing ever since, according to the principles set out by Charles Darwin. And whatever we are now is the fruit of a great evolutionary feat. In fact, human evolution has been real original. Our transformation over time responds more and more to a type of cultural selection. Or what's the same, it responds less and less to biological selection. This is to say that, for our species, being tall or strong or attractive is now not as important as being socially well adapted vis-a-vis given moments or places. For this reason, social success, financial well-being, or the perception of social adequacy is more important than beauty or physical attractiveness. One's education, academic level, or simply being in tune with the latest fashion might constitute the most important factors in our species' sexual attraction. Each person's cultural components are now what best guarantee one's real possibilities of reproductive success, or of one's quality and aspirations in life. Culture, in the widest sense of the word, is the scale by which we choose one another to give continuity to humanity. And our cultural roots are often based on the knowledge that we have gleaned and continue to glean from other living beings. From beings who share our space and who have also shared our history from the moment we first believed that we were not just another kind of monkey. A moment that was no doubt marked by our capacity for learning, because culture, our culture, is only transmitted by copying. Our capacity to assimilate information is without a shadow of a doubt the most developed in the entire animal kingdom. We are the least instinctive animals, but in exchange, we have specialized in learning, in associating, and thus in imitating. The better part of our sciences, arts, and technologies all owe something to pure plagiarism, some better than others, which at the same time is the result of observing that which surrounds us. It's no secret that we have observed animals from the very earliest stages of our development. We needed to understand them in order to defend ourselves from them and to hunt them. We painted their likenesses on the walls of our sacred caves and on the ceramics we used to heat and carry our food. And over time, thanks to the accumulation of our knowledge, we discovered in nature much more than we aimed to. Normally, creativity requires a starting off point. For us, the living world has been quite a fertile muse. Primitive clay and earthenware objects made by our ancestors have helped anthropologists define and classify cultures with respect to time and location, according to their shapes and artistic styles. We once again believed that only we could have thought of such forms and the way to use a hollowed-out gourd. But neither the work done with those materials nor their various applications, not even the most practical designs, were originally human. Many species, in fact, and much earlier on, knew the versatility of the mixture of earth, water, and a little chemistry. No doubt, birds' nests and the techniques birds and insects use to build their homes served as an inspiration for our earliest artisans. But these masters would find many new possibilities for mixtures of earth and water. If after drying and hardening it could protect the young of other animals for months and even years at a time, it was evident that it could also serve as an excellent insulation against extreme temperatures, and of course, hold and preserve foodstuffs while protecting them from parasites. And when mixed with plant fibers, this muddy blend could obtain a remarkable consistency. And with it, with this adobe, bricks could be made, which would sustain civilization over the longest period of human history. Cities built of adobe, earthenware bowls, and clay pots, even magic. Perhaps the preservative properties this versatile material had gave some ancient shaman the idea of using it cosmetically in order to take on a more powerful image that might transmit a sense of durability, of immunity, properties associated with the earth itself. By covering themselves in mud, perhaps people were trying to lengthen their lives somehow. Or maybe it was just another case of observing nature, of copying animals, and almost unwittingly realizing that mud could serve as excellent protection against blood parasites and other potentially harmful attackers of the skin. And man saw that this was good. So good, in fact, that this protection against insects and the diseases they carried really could lengthen a person's life. We were able to take advantage of this material for construction, as an unguent, and as a basic element of culture. But we didn't discover it, not really. Animals showed us the way. All human prehistory is rife with examples just like the one involving clay. An infinity of materials and substances were revealed to us, if you will, by animals we too often consider inferior. Could it be that we consider ourselves superior without reason? Wasps, for example, shape their hives with a special, extremely light and resilient substance that would play a major role in redefining man's time on Earth. The passage from prehistory to history was written on paper. Paper from the hives of wasps. By chewing wood and mixing it with their saliva, these insects have essentially made liquid cardboard, a rudimentary type of paper that they shape with their jaws into fine laminae. This then dries quickly and serves as the perfect material for tough, resistant incubating niches. Beehives are constructed using a different material, wax. And in the wax, the bees store their honey. Early man took a while longer to discover that it was practically impossible for bacteria or fungi to reproduce and proliferate in a beehive, due to the fact that these superorganized little insects also know how to make highly effective antibiotics. Spiderwebs also have antibacterial properties, which make them a perfect pantry, though perhaps their most relevant qualities are their elasticity and strength. In fact, a spiderweb is superior in this respect to nylon and even steel. Spiders, wasps, and caterpillars drew our attention for another reason too: a revolutionary understanding of geometry and order. It truly is incredible how many things are done or made by animals that don't confer even a smidgen of an inkling that these beings are anything other than simple living structures doomed to perish. In keeping with these parameters, both animals and humans form part of the same whole: workers and engineers, some more qualified than others, who carry out their instinct for survival, sometimes with work, trial and error, and sometimes with nothing more than selection and death. The apprenticeship that we have done with nature has impetuously directed the steps of development of man and his cultures. At times, these steps have been slow and costly. At other times, they've been authentic leaps and bounds. The Silk Route is one of history's most important developments with respect to contributing to the establishment of bonds and links between the peoples of Europe, Asia, and Africa. If from one place came brilliant thread made by caterpillars, from another came fabrics designed by artisans who had observed birds. In each and every corner of the world, there were different wells of inspiration. African weaver birds probably invented the technique of tying bows and knots. The golden oriole from the New World threads the finest of plant strands with their beaks. They can sew with their mouths as well as a first-rate tailor. Their efforts result in sturdy structures for their offspring. And the smartest apes of all were right there watching, eager to have the chance to associate new ideas with new necessities. In fact, intelligence has been defined as the capacity to make such connections. And since many animals possess obvious intellectual prowess, the difference must once again be considered a question of degree. With those knots, bows, and fabrics, man would come up with the first of a series of cognitive associations even more complex than cloth or clothing. Motivated by the function that most conditions the mind and morphology of any animal, the need to obtain sustenance, man would reinvent the methods he used to acquire food. According to paleoanthropologists, it all started with gathering. In fact, they say that's why we stood up on two legs, to free our hands so we could pick or collect more and more. Free hands paved the way to a morphological change and a change in habits which led to a marked increase in our capacity to hunt. Free hands and very attentive eyes. There is no skill that we have imitated and/or adapted from wildlife better than the art of killing. We are masters. Masters who of course had their own masters, but we have taken it all much farther. We reached the very top of the pyramid of predation. Our level of sophistication in making weapons increased in relation to our aggressiveness towards obtaining more. It was a short step to fighting one another over supplies or territory, no matter how big or small. But war doesn't make us different either. Fratricidal conflict appears among all the different beasts on this planet. Our envy and drive for power aren't so different from the quest for success naturally pursued by all living beings. For some people, our false motivations and the sadistic cruelty of our wars and their consequences could place us on a different level than that occupied by other animals. But others believe that combat is just another element along the path of evolution. And if we're nothing more than a species that is the product of wild nature, perhaps we should assume that victory belongs exclusively to the strongest. Is our world a world of beasts? Or can we find at the center of our battlefields certain conditions that couldn't exist among beasts? We may be the only animals, given such power and ambition, that could completely exterminate ourselves if we exceeded our destructive impulses. However, if by chance humans disappeared all at once, wouldn't the surviving species continue? What then would our ephemeral pass through history have meant for planet Earth? But whatever doubts there may be, it is certainly curious, if not downright savage, that war may actually have been the most important factor in our evolutionary changes. From the very beginning, plants had to develop poisons to combat pests that would devour their leaves. The chemical war unleashed between the plant and animal kingdoms has fomented the perfecting of some of the most amazing toxic formulas, and in juxtaposition, some of the most incredible defensive systems and ingenious antidotes. War destroys and favors creativity at the same time. It's the most powerful ally of natural selection, but it does not transform the warrior into something supernatural. War is a very earthbound concept. In their peculiar war against the plant world, these monkeys discovered the key moment in their favorite tree's cycle, when the guapinol produces less toxins and the monkeys can eat its fruit without danger. When there was no danger, they could pass down this knowledge to their young. Plants' poison seems to have played a fundamental role in the design of a complex form of language among primates. But they haven't stopped being simple monkeys because of that. Certain African acacias have elaborated a strategic plan to keep giraffes from eating all their leaves. When they realize they are being attacked, each plant multiplies by 10 the amount of toxin in their sap and chemically alerts the rest of the stand that they should do the same to deter the enemy. The bitter taste the leaves take on in barely a few minutes dissuades the herbivores quickly. They'll have to look for lunch in another place. The fight to eat, and not to get eaten, is a violent one, and it requires biology to adapt, to change, to evolve. The human race, immersed in such a violent natural environment, has witnessed how the fight for survival can create new models that are useful in competition. And it has placed all of them at its disposal. We have learned to use poisons made by plants. With spices, we have been able to store and protect our food from parasites. And from that point on, from the knowledge we gleaned regarding the defensive mechanisms and aggressiveness of the beings we increasingly learned more and more about, we have developed such concepts as pharmaceuticals and medicine. Concepts, we must acknowledge, that have taught us a great deal about altruism, generosity, and cooperation. These traits, so closely linked to the good feelings that define us as persons, can also be found in other species with a sufficient degree of cerebral development and high levels of gregariousness. Although this is only found in a very germinal and basic stage. As in all primates, the individuals of the same clan are well differentiated hierarchically. And between each class or social level, relations, duties, and rights are firmly established as in any other biological family. Among baboons, certain behaviors have been clearly observed that might uncover the origins of altruism and individual sacrifice for the good of the entire community. The strongest young males tend to position themselves on the group's periphery. This makes them the perfect target of predators. But by doing so, they make sure the mothers, babies, and most experienced males in the clan are safer. In this way, the clan's genetic heritage and culture are protected to the maximum. The selfish gene only seeks survival and pays no heed to what's best or who's best for the whole. Perhaps this was the way early societies took their first steps towards generous behavior, towards not thinking only about oneself, but rather valuing what is necessary for everyone. These are behaviors that must be learned and thus taught. Chromosomes have to leave some room to move for this. They have to predispose themselves to select not only the strong, but the good too. We are not the first beings capable of giving our lives for others, nor are we the first or the only ones to associate ourselves with and domesticate other plant or animal species. Though, of course, we do things whole hog. The advantages of cultivating large extensions of land and of grazing uncountable flocks and herds has allowed us to grow enormously. The number of people and the quality of life we enjoy have grown practically everywhere. The different cultures on Earth see their personalities reflected in the way they have tamed their livestock or tilled their fields. And by the same measure, every patch of Earth has etched in its shepherds their own unique way of being, of living, and of resisting. But the symbiosis, or parasitism, that we have striven for and worked out with the environment does not clearly place us apart from the animal world. Many other species, in their own ways, have also solved their ecological relationships in a like manner. There are fish that care for, prune, and defend fields of algae for consumption, and jellyfish that carry in their tentacles colonies of unicellular plants that provide solar energy. For our way of life, agriculture and raising livestock were transcendental revolutions. But ants and termites have cultivated for a much longer time entire plantations of fungi underground, controlling to a T the climatic seasons, temperature, humidity, and light. Even aphids have allowed themselves to be shepherded by ants in exchange for protection. And none of these farmers or ranchers claim any special consideration from natural historians. Heck, they're only bugs. But after such a long time of observation and reflection, the extraordinary human mind has processed so much first-rate information that it has managed to feel. to feel new things in new ways, things that, we must admit, no other being can quite experience. We search to understand and touch the conscience and our soul, an inner spirit that might simply be chemically based, but which managed to perceive the satisfaction found when one loves and shares, or the pain produced by death. We note that deep inside us, there's a hidden desire to discern between good and evil. And we have decided that these feelings should be passed on, so that they might endure over time, or at least until the sun burns out. Treaties, theories, theorems, and age-old wisdom, all that man has processed and perfected concerning the things he's observed around him, have positioned him as the dominator of all he sees. This is perhaps the best reason we should respect our intuition, so unique among all living things. It urges us to protect the environment in which we live. Here, we are the dominant species. Little escapes our power and control. The weather, perhaps. But if we want to live for millions of years more and expand our civilization into the rest of the universe, we still have a lot to learn. For example, we would have to learn how to lengthen our lifespans, or at least maintain our bodies in a kind of suspended animation until the right dawn comes along. We would have to find the way to maintain control over each and every heartbeat, so that not even an iota of our life force could escape. To achieve this, maybe we should look to the origin of life, maybe at bacteria, which don't die, but only divide, and probably came to this world from another. In a way, bacteria live a kind of eternal life, and although they may have been space travelers like we are now, and may accompany us on our future voyages to colonize the universe, it is undeniable that if man were nothing more than a very evolved bacteria, an animal 3.5 billion years old, we would be considered, at the very least, one very strange animal. The weirdest animal of all. The greatest rara avis of all nature. Because it is true that many species speak complex, rich languages, but only we write poetry and compose music. Because it is true that animals design and use all types of tools, but no other has figured out how to use and tame fire, and by extension, treat objects with lasers. We hunt, we construct, and we move about better than any other species on this planet, where after 4.5 billion years, we reign supreme, able to do the very best and the very worst. Love and violence. The human family brings together all the good things and all the bad things that life has to offer. Animals take maximum advantage of the resources in their environment, but not a one of them feels responsible for the future of the world. No other life form has ever considered the possibility of actually measuring the amount of sustenance left before there is no more. No other life form has ever calculated the time there is left to organize and preserve its heritage for tomorrow. No other life form has ever lamented the disappearance of some of its neighbors, while at the same time dooming still others to the very same abyss of destruction. With our great lack of coherence, we have conquered the entire world. We have reproduced to the maximum of our physical possibilities. We have lengthened our lives above and beyond the most optimistic quotas put forth by our ancestors. All the while, in the full knowledge that someday we must die. Our concept of time is infinite. We can dream about years on end, but precisely because we can do so, we fear not only the danger faced by other animals, but death. And we fear death differently because most people have come to believe that death is not final. Belief. If there exists a difference between animal sapiens and Homo sapiens, there can be little doubt that it must be looked for in a realm that transcends biology and chemistry. We can imagine eternity. We can act on a metaphysical level, perhaps even independently of our chromosomal map. Because modern genetic science still has not located the specific gene of hope.